Hey YouTube, welcome back. This is a two-part build guide. We are exploring using Gathering Storm in patch 1.1. And broadly speaking, the idea for this is I want to melee attack with Gathering Storm. It's a melee thing, it can be a proc thing, it can be a spell thing. And Gathering Storm has really showcased itself well in a number of builds, but there's a couple components to it. So there's the melee attack, there's Storm stacks, which you primarily generate by melee attacking, and then there's also the Storm Bolts, which you can proc off of other skills, primarily things like Maelstrom and, in a most popular build, Tornado. So Tornado proccing Storm Bolts and then using the Storm Bolts from the Gathering Storm skill tree is very, very popular in Shaman and various Druid builds. Things like Tornado Spam Shaman, Tornado Spam Druid transforming into a Werebear to get more multipliers. Those are all the rage. They're quite strong. I wanted to melee attack. One of the benefits of melee attacking with Gathering Storm is that you generate storm stacks. And I figured that if I generate 50 storm stacks, then they instantly get consumed and generate more storm bolts, and that'd be a fun way of dealing damage. So that said, we had a couple ideas for how to go about building this character. One would be crits, where like your melee attack is, maybe it's lightning, maybe it's cold, maybe it's something else. And then you're proccing these spells as well, and that's a kind of cool idea. There's some good ideas for like stacking attunement there, because attunement gives you flat damage. So there's some stuff you could do. And then another idea is, well, if you want your spell and your melee component of Gathering Storm to have the same kind of damage, you could harmonize that by being an ailment build. So the ailment that jumps out first with Gathering Storm is Frostbite, which brings us to this build and why we're about to pivot off it. So we're playing a Frostbite melee Gathering Storm. I want to say Berserker. What's this class called? Beastmaster? So Beastmaster, a couple cool things going for it. In Shaman, if you were going Frostbite, I would definitely stack Attunement because you have a bunch of payoffs for being an attunement-based character. You get life regeneration, you get stun avoidance, all kinds of good stuff. Even mana regeneration if you're going for that, which I think you probably would want to. On a Druid, you would potentially go for a Frostbite attunement stacking build as well. Maybe not with Gathering Storm, but attunement has a great payoff built into Swarmblade form, giving you freeze rate multi, then freeze rate multi pays into Snowdrift boots, and that's a very cool way of building out a character. On a Beastmaster, there's no particular reason to be building attunement, and you could either go attunement or you could go freeze rate multi. So we wanted to go freeze rate multi for our penetration, but then we also have some freeze rate multi built into the Gathering Storm skill tree. We have some extra penetration built in the Gathering Storm skill tree, and I ended up not stacking attunements at all and not going for those nodes in Gathering Storm. Instead, because we're melee attack speed focused, we're punting things, we're actually dual wielding as well. We are dual wielding Irun's Penance, which is a brand new weapon introduced in the 1.1 patch. This thing has two very important modifiers for us. So it has cold damage leeches health, which ailments are kind of hard to leech with. Normally, if you want to leech an ailment, you need something like Valdir's Chalice for bleed, or you're locked into using a bleeding heart. But because we have cold leeches health on Irun's Penance, it means that we can use something like Annihilus instead in order to get a bunch of extra levels to all of our skills. So not only does this have cold damage leeches health, but it also has cold penetration. The difference between the minimum roll, 10, and the maximum roll, 34 cold penetration on the sword is a huge difference. So if you end up using this in any build, make sure you're using one with good cold penetration as an affix on this thing. So that's the idea for the build. We're not stacking attunement, even though it looks like that's the obvious thing to be doing, because we have a bunch of penetration coming in from other sources. So the rest of this is like pretty normal looking stuff. Frenzy Totem doesn't give us any flat damage, but it still gives us, more damage while tethered. Tornado gives us attack speed and it procs some extra bolts for us. And we are using Excited Bolts in Gathering Storm. So in the clips you saw that normally my mana ends up being about 50%, but sometimes we can maintain it all the way up at 100% as well. So we've got pretty good mana generation. It's not perfect, but there. So that's what it looks like on multiple enemies. And here's what it might look like on single target. So you see my mana is going to climb up just a little bit faster here. And we are maintaining Warcry, Maelstrom, Tornado, both of those numlocks, Excited Bolts on Maelstrom, Tornado, and our basic attack. And our mana just like climbs back up. So only having 300 mana, like say we have 200 mana most of the time. 200 mana, damage per 10 current, 20. So 20 times 3 is 60. So it's like 60% more damage off this Excited Bolt node. So that's pretty cool. The last thing that I'll say about this build is like, I think that if you're playing like a melee thing, you definitely want to be using something with Gathering, or something. If you're playing a melee Gathering Storm build, you definitely want to be doing something with Storm Bolt as well. Strictly speaking, melee damage Gathering Storm does not seem like the place to be. I did my research and I looked around at all the other builds out on YouTube, World, Last Epoch, Tools.com, all the other build planners and build guides that were out there. And there were some that were trying to deal melee damage Gathering Storm, and I just don't recommend it. You have like 2 more multipliers and some extra penetration. If you're playing Gathering Storm as a melee attack, you need to be scaling both components, both spell damage and melee damage. Maybe you're doing something with the Tempest weapon node over here, but doing something with ailment is a nice one as well. So the build's cool. I like it. The build has fine damage, but I want to describe why we're about to pivot off this build as well. So we have tier 7 melee attack speed here. We have tier 5 melee attack speed and tier 7 shock. We have tier 7 Ellie Dot on our Stormcarved Testament. We have tier 7 melee attack speed on our Frostbite Shackles. We have tier 7 Ellie Dot on our +2 Nihilist here. We have some tier 7 chance to gain a storm stack when you use a thing in an Italian enemy. And we've got our tier 7 movement speed over here. So our idols are Frostbite Boar, Frostbite Boar, Frostbite Boar, and then Throne of Ambition because we're dealing cold damage. What I'm trying to say is my gear is not garbage. The garbage piece of our gear is the fact that we only have 1 LP on our Frostbite Shackles and we're missing hybrid health. We only have movement speed on our Snowdrifts and we don't have movement speed and hybrid health. You know, I have my tier 7 modifier up here, but I don't have my tier 7 or my tier 7% health. I've got tier 7 flat, but I don't have tier 7% health. And like it makes me reflect on being a Beastmaster. Beastmaster really does not get much for free in terms of gearing stuff. Like I have some free cold and lightning resistance that I get to spec into, but I really don't want to be taking 4% physical res per point. It's not that good. It's kind of something I'm not interested in. So in 1.1, Beastmaster got the brand new identity of being the only of the 3 classes or the 3 masteries here that gains access to Aspect of the Boar on melee hit. So that's great. It's no longer something that every single Primalist build needs to take. Instead, only the Beastmasters get access to this. And I thought that it was going to feel better as like a differentiating point. But really, I just like, it highlights to me that I don't have resistances anywhere. And I guess my druids don't either. Like druids don't really get anything in anything that's different. They get stuff while transformed, which ends up being good, but nothing else. And then shaman also doesn't. But I don't know. I've really felt it most on Beastmaster than anywhere else. That I'm not getting any stats for free in terms of like free suffixes, free endurance, free crit avoid, free things like that. And so our health totals kind of suffered there. In terms of DPS for this character, like we have 2 swords that are pretty good. They're not perfect, but they're pretty good. We failed a lot of slams on these things. The damage is fine. It's fine. The build currently does not kill Jura before her 2nd slam. And if we got a little bit of extra damage, like our rings could be better. Obviously, I'm missing a prefix there for like Ellie Dot or freeze rate multi. And I'm missing like a prefix there. It could be like Ellie Dot or freeze rate multi as well. But for these things, like we're missing a little bit, but we're really not missing that much in the grand scheme of things. Our chest piece could have plus levels to Gathering Storm, but our plus levels are going to give us like attack speed. That's about it. There's really not much else that we're getting access to. Like we could try to get the attunement stuff as well, but I only have 22 attunement, right? So the build's kind of plateaued just a little bit. I love the idea of Gathering Storm as a melee attack. We're going to keep playing different variations of it, but I wanted to like take a quick snapshot of the character right now and show you where my head's at, the kinds of things that I like, the kinds of things that I don't like. I do like the play style of the build. Like, one of the things about ailment builds is that when you're punching one enemy, you will overkill the enemy. You know what I mean? So like you need to stack up enough so that the monster dies in time, but by the time you kill the monster, it's got, you know, 700 stacks on it, and then the monster dies, and then you got to ramp up on the new monster. One of the interesting things about playing an ailment-focused, I guess not even ailment-focused, but like playing Gathering Storm, is that not only are you ramping up something on the enemy, but you're also ramping up something on yourself. So we have this, like, whenever you lose a stack, you have a chance to gain a stack instead, which is pretty cool. And then whenever you hit the enemy, you have a chance to consume mana and generate extra stacks over here. And all those extra stacks, they buffer each other, right? So when you're a melee character, like you kill one monster and you got to walk up to the next monster. And normally when you're walking up to the next monster, like you're really vulnerable because you're not leeching while you're walking up to the monster, and you're not dealing damage until you're literally right on top of the monster. But having Tornado and Maelstrom and the Storm Bolts from those, and the extra Storm stacks in your character, dealing ambient damage around yourself, which also causes you to leech the entire time, like, it's nice. It's a nice form of defense. Obviously, I wish I had another 1,000 life. You know, gear sucks, but in terms of playing a melee character, the clear speed does not feel bad. The single target damage, for the amount of gear that we have, I expected the single target damage to feel better. And that's the part that disappoints me. Like, our gear is pretty good. It's not perfect. We're not missing that many things. And if we perfected the character, it would be like, 20 or 30% better. But I don't think that would quite cut it yet. So here's the snapshot. Here's our Frostbite dual wield, featuring Irun's Penance Beastmaster with Gathering Storm. And we're going to try different stuff. If you want to know what the future holds in for this particular character, we want to drop the Frostbite stuff altogether and instead make use of the Deep Wounds node in the Beastmaster skill tree. So we have no support for Frostbite except for the nodes that we're going out of the way to pick up in Druid and in the Shaman skill tree. What if we trim those? We trim these items here, and we instead try to be a bleed build. So it's like it's a separate way of trying to harmonize the damage of the spell and the melee attack, and hopefully there's some different unique stuff that we can find out there. If you're playing Gathering Storm, I am genuinely interested in knowing how you're playing it. I know Storm Bolts and Tornado procs are OP. I get it. I've seen it many, many times. But if you're melee attacking with Gathering Storm, that is what I'm definitely interested in right now, and variations around those kinds of things. If you're doing it, let me know. I love sharing ideas. But until then, see you next time.